Hey everybody, got a few more folks need to get in here. Easy ought to be here soon. It's good to see y'all though. We'll just be getting started up here in a minute or two. Hey White Chocolate. Hey Carolina. I guess let's go ahead and make White Chocolate a speaker. We probably also need Daz and James to be speakers for sure. And of course, Easy needs to probably be a co-host.
Hey, hey.
What up, Easy?
Pretty stoked to be here today. Just was trying to make sure my pods were connected and everything. I think they're working. Yeah, very, very excited. So much has gone on to make this really, really amazing book happen. So I'm just excited to get to, hang out with some of the amazing uh, technicians and artists and authors that have pulled this together and get a little sneak peek out into the wild.
Hey, yeah, I'm really excited to be here too. I'm glad to see that James is up as a speaker with us. We still need to get White Chocolate his speaker role, and we need to get Dazarine the speaking privileges as well. But yeah, I mean, it's just lovely to be here. I can't believe how quickly this project came together, or how high quality it is. I mean, I don't know. I think this is, without a doubt, the best thing I've ever been a part of, and it's just really hard to contain all the excitement there.
That is pretty damn exciting. I mean, I know the quality is incredible from being in and it's so cool to be in a top secret chat. From being in the top secret chat, I've gotten some insights, and it's just yeah, it's incredible about how how fast something can move when the passion is there. It's just the collaborative spirit really moves people, to push themselves beyond maybe the comfort zone or what would be, normal or what would be easy. So yeah, it's been really cool to just kind of be watching the process, and maybe I put a little, like, something in here and there, just an opinion about it, a piece of art or whatever. But I love just watching and seeing the process unfold, and it is incredibly fast paced. So yeah, very excited. I think we got, yeah, I see now what chocolate is a speak. I know that sometimes in the Twitter spaces it takes a while when you're trying to give out these roles, so it does look like they're working and they're taking now. Glad about that.
Yeah, yeah. So just to kind of structure this and let everybody know what the sort of itinerary is for today, I thought it would be really nice, as White Chocolate is sort of the project sponsor. He's the guy who kind of came up with the idea, and kind of brought it up, and has been, really taking a strong leadership role around all the creative processes that have been ongoing. And so I just think it would be lovely for him and Easy to chat a little bit so that everybody gets a real clear picture of what the project is. And then we've got a really special thing we're going to do here. We're going to read chapter 1 of the book over the Twitter Spaces here, so that everybody gets kind of that first experience of this thing that we've created together here today. And then after that, we may have time for some questions. We may be able to get a little bit into chapter 2. Um, there's really a lot of different possibilities here. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait.
Sounds great. Do we want to kind of start kicking it along? Do we want to give people a few more minutes to trickle in?
I think the best introduction would be just good content. I guess
Yeah.
we could reset if a lot more people show up, but I say let's go ahead and jump right in, man.
Cool. Well, I always love, and I think that it's important for people that have taken the time to come and hang out and get this sneak peek. If White Chocolate, if you want to give a little bit of the background into like the inspiration of choosing this kind of story, this path.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it was, at the very end of May, this mask became available and jumped on it. And we were, unfortunately, well, fortunately for some, fortunately for some, unfortunately for others, another mod was trying to grab this. It was just a little bit too slow, and it ended up in my wallet. And so, good natured as we are, we were talking about what to name it, and even got the offer to basically pay for burning cover the NCT to go ahead and name it. And some of this got thrown out was the Zeus bit, because it's got this Jupiter glyph and the tie with the eagle being part of the Zeus mythology.
Oh, and
And
just in case
yeah,
anyone listening in wants to see the Hashmask, its title is the Mask of Ganymede. That's Ganymede, Ganymede, just like the title of this Twitter Spaces. So it's the Abduction of Ganymede is the title. You can go to OpenSea and search that right now, and you can actually have a look at the artifact and at the glyph that White Chocolate's talking about right now.
yeah. Oh, maybe I should tweet that out next. I'm going to tweet out this spaces that we're doing, and I could throw one of them out next for sure. Help people out there.
Very
Uh,
cool.
yeah. So
Before
go
Well,
go.
as you continue on, I did notice that you are you're throwing some things out about the name change and the burning of the token. So maybe we should just let people know real quick before we dive back into this very cool behind the scenes kind of inspiration for the starting of this project, this book, how that in Hashmasks you're able to do these name changes. If you want to just kind of give people the quick once over about that.
Oh yeah, sometimes I get so wrapped up and just forget, get your own kind of space and head and forget. So the the deal with that is, so back in January when Hashmask launched, they were the very first ERC 721, an NFT, to produce its own ERC 20 token. And so this utility token that we have, is NCT, stands for name change token. And what that does is allows the owner to create a unique name, no two names are the same, and write it onto the blockchain. So if you go to the hashmask.com, you can even see the history of some of these that have been renamed. And a few actually have like little poems that are written by scribing out essentially a bunch of names. And it works by burning 1830 NCT. So each hash mask produces 10 of those tokens per day, which comes out to 2 per year. Now that doesn't go on forever. That will stop 10 years from launch date. So we've got just about a little under 9.25 years left of producing NCT.
See,
Now,
that is so freaking cool that I just wanted to make sure we get that out to everybody. It's very a really fun way to interact with one of your NFTs, being able to give it a name, and I hadn't known about the little poems. Like that's just super cool. I love being able to append an NFT, and I think the way that you guys went about it with creating this, the Hashmask producing the NCT and being able to burn those
yeah, it was
form up,
something.
not being able to just kind of do it willy-nilly, but having it like it's just an amazing setup.
Yeah, and thank you for reminding me. Like I said, I just kind of get a bit into my own space there and forget. But yeah, that's how it works. And actually, one of the MassDAO's former devs had figured out how to work implementing it in other projects, and just amazing stuff. I think we name our cars. We name our boats, our dogs. If you got a beach house, you probably name that. And so it just fits with our NFTs too. Some people don't want to name them at all. They want to save that and be able to sell one maybe in 10 years when that's a really, to be able to get a hash mask that hasn't been named. And others think, man, I got to jump on that big name real quick. So, yeah.
It adds a whole other element, and the fact that you guys are working to be able to use this with other projects is also super exciting and will lead to some really fun stuff.
Well, I think so. Well, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it already had to even be able to say, right?
Oh,
right, yeah.
Yeah, just a quick recap for anybody who might be joining us now. We're talking about the genesis of this project, and basically, what White Chocolate is telling everyone about is that the NCT naming token from the Hashmask community allowed him to name one of the Hashmasks, and from that name is where the origin of the Mask of Ganymede story actually comes from.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So we were at about, I think you had been kind of throwing around some names. The imagery, the eagle and stuff, lent it towards a Zeus name, and maybe just continue on from there.
Oh, yeah. So it basically happened to be that, one kind of late night, I was up and trying to look for some more, and I didn't remember the exact thing that that mod had, the name that mod had thrown out. And I started Googling and came upon the abduction of Ganymede. And it was this 45-year-old Greek myth of a Trojan who was abducted by Zeus. He was such a good-looking guy, and Zeus wanted him to be his cupbearer and pour that wine for him, and sent his eagle to abduct him. So that story ended up being, it exists on clay pottery and then has been recast, if you will, by greats like Michelangelo and Rembrandt. And just a quick Google search will show you a bunch of these that's out there. And one thing that really struck me, well, I guess it would be kind of in two parts, is that this is not a coincidence. Someone at the Hashmask thought of this and put it together. Like this just fits. It fits so well. And then the second was looking at the Rembrandt renditions, if you will, was that the Ganymede had this pasty white skin. And I just thought, how is that possible if he was a Trojan on the Mediterranean and couldn't even get a tan? And then looking at this fine mask with its blue skin and thought, well, okay, here is a being that is apt to resist the sun. And how perfect. So glad to join the family of different Ganymedes out there. That's the short version.
So cool. I love it. Those background stories, I think, lend a lot of richness to what we're about to share, and just give a little more of that background. So thank you for sharing that.
Most welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. We should probably take a moment here to go ahead and introduce our lead writer, Dazarine, and our art lead, Mr. James Cowan. While we're at it, these are some folks who have come in. Dazarine was actually discovered in the Wit Publishing Token Smart event. He just started writing, and everybody was like, "Whoa, this guy's really good at this." And he was like, "Huh, that's kind of strange. I never really thought of myself as a writer." And I mean, just kind of one thing led to another, and the next thing you know, he's actually really been the driving force behind pretty much all of the scenes and most of the dialogue in this text. We also have to send a shout out to Spark Twain, who is a cipher rapper and who is an author as well, but he actually kind of structured out like this narrative and then decided to take off. So we kind of finished the project without him, but that is totally cool, and we're super stoked with his idea. That's why we kept it and continue to write around it. But I guess James, would you like to tell the good people just a few words about yourself and about how you came to be part of the project?
I lived next to Dylan in Texas 12 years ago, and we've been speaking about philosophy and art for almost 12 years on and off. Shout out to Carlos, who is the principal sketch artist on this. His vision on this is really outstanding. Um, I'm a illustrator and animator, Photoshop buff, graphic designer. And when they brought the project to me, I remember when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time in the library with these old school Random House little short novels on Greek mythology, and I jumped at it because the story and the summary and the outline was just outstanding. It's a new way to tell it, and as I was saying, it's really a tradition to kind of take a piece of mythology and let it evolve with you and the style of the times as it goes. And I think we've done a good job doing that here. I've had a great experience in the community here, working here. We decided to go with a more mythic Mike Manola, um, heavy black, very shaded type of style, and we're very excited about it. Again, my team has been great. Carlos is an outstanding artist, and we have been just cranking. And yeah, this is such a great project, such a great community. Masked Out, Paged Out, those guys have been so supportive, and the ideas that have come across have been some of the best collaborations I've worked in my career.
Wow.
That's high praise. Thank you, James.
And
Yeah.
I think White Chocolate had touched on the concept of this being meant to be, and I just think that's 100%. That's the way it is. With Dazarine coming in through kind of the whippy and past the pen, again, just meant to be. Right space, right time, and all of this has developed just so naturally, and Spark Twain coming in and kind of helping form some of the bones. And in this space, it's pretty wild and crazy, so sometimes people are bouncing from project to project, but it's just incredible how this has come together. And yeah, if Dazarine wants to hop on, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Daz, do you mind just jumping up and introducing yourself to the good people?
Sure thing. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us today. Yeah, it's been an amazing project to work on. I suppose it's kind of coming to a close now. And yeah, just everyone's been so supportive. And I think echoing the sentiment of Easy and Dylan and James was kind of like almost meant to be, where everything seemed to work together and it was a kind of a tight deadline. But as a team, just the cohesiveness and just the all around function of everyone seemed to come and work really well together. So we kind of all propelled each other, and I think it's just we've turned out something really special, and I really enjoyed every aspect of it. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it as well, because I thought it was an amazing process and just so happy to be involved in it.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, it's really special to have not only such a talented team, but such a supportive team. Because for anybody that's been in productions, whether that's, film, and I haven't done as much in the literature field, but I'm sure it goes on there, it's not always like a fun, a good old time. Like things can get kind of nasty. But in this community, in this spirit, in this vibe, there's so much support, and even running against the clock with a deadline, people are still very supportive and just like doing everything they can to help each other out. And so it's just phenomenal to be a part of what I think is a historic moment here today, where we're bringing forward this sneak peek of the very first Mask DAO, page DAO, NFT book, The Mask of Ganymede.
All right. Well, shall we bump read it, y'all? Or how would y'all like to proceed on that front? And for the audience, what we do when we read this as a group, it is somebody will read for a while, and then they say bump and someone else's name, and that person takes over. So I was thinking that might be a good way for us to kind of proceed through the chapter as a group here. Does that sound good to everyone?
Lovely, lovely.
Sounds
right.
fun.
Cool. Well, I guess would you like to start us off, Mr. White Chocolate?
I would. Are you all ready? You ready for the bumping?
Oh, I think I'm ready.
Okay. Here we go. Charlene and Peter Jr. gazed out of the open window at the ocean blue, their grandfather gazing with them. Sunsets off the Floridian Gulf Coast are magical, and for the small sliver of time that is sunset, it's where most Floridians point their gaze. The gentle family Panagopoulos was a humble tribe, founded by Grandpa Atos and Grandma Dimitra when they emigrated from Greece. Originally a fisherman, Grandpa Atos was now a conservationist working to encourage even Floridians to avoid seafood. All of the family were avid swimmers, and Peter, Atos's second son, ran a successful seafaring company specializing in marine wildlife tours and boat rentals. Atos had originally founded the enterprise with his former fishing vessel over half a century before, and the family was overjoyed with the success that had come with the venture. Before the sun completed its descent, Grandpa cleared his throat loudly to pull the children's attention back to him. They still had one more chapter. He was also feeling rather tired. As darkness crept in, so did a mellow feeling. It was comfortable sometimes, but he was still getting used to the old man's body. Holding the book became a chore, but he kept on, remembering the scene earlier. Charlene and Peter Jr. insisted upon having this book read to them aloud each year during the week the family spent together in December, when the tours slowed for the Christmas and New Year's holidays. I'm not even going to be tired anymore after I finish this chapter, Atos Panagopoulos thought to himself, still somehow deeply puzzled by the very idea that his body could feel fatigue. Relaxation was a peaceful state, albeit a sluggish one. The grandkids were staring now. Zeus thrust his hand upward from the bowl of sand, and into the sky fled every last bit of it. Bump Dylan.
All right. Let your name be known through the heavens as it is known to me.
Ganymede.
Ganymede.
Bearer of the nectar.
We got an echo going. Can you mute? Bearer of the nectar of life. Upon your shoulders is the great weight of our godly existence, and to all shall it be known. Ganymede, cupbearer to the gods. Ganymede, the immortal. Ganymede, the light in the sky. The sand became the stars as it reached further beyond the heavens and into the sky. Zeus smiled. Grandpa closed the book and looked at the children. They didn't look tired. He would never cease to be amazed at just how much energy children can store during the day, only to release it all just before bed. This was not the first time he had read this story or the 20th, and he was surprised that their attention never went. Apart from their familiarity with the story, they were also preteens now. Still, Every word held their interest, as if they were hearing it for the first time. There were many stories near to their hearts, but none sat closer than the Abduction of Ganymede. It was an old translation, and the work had long since gone out of print. But Atos had a funny way of reading, and it was almost as if he took on a new life when he told the story to his grandchildren each time. When he was feeling particularly tired, he simply read the pages to them aloud. Perhaps the same burden had once rested with his father, but that was too long ago to think about. As you get older, you start to see your parents more as normal people, and he thought of his own mother and father often. The beauty of youth is not having to comprehend how difficult life can be, but some stories are meant to be shared. They seem to take on a life of their own as they are passed down like a torch from generation to generation. And these stories die unless they are shared. Charlene and Peter Jr. were old enough now. Grandpa decided it was time to share his gift with them for the first time, as he'd never told it before. I'm going to tell them the true story, Atos thought. Peter Jr. is tall and strong, and Charlene has the soul of one far beyond her own years. They're as mature as they have ever been, and I am aging. It must be told truly now, if I am to make my point with them. Bump Dazzarine.
Grandpa smiled to himself with his final thought. He had it made. They were bright kids. Grandkids looked at each other and then back at him. What do you think about Grandpa? As Charlene said this, they both laughed. Grandpa took the cue and let out a deep chuckle, which paired with his smile to produce an impression of a sophisticated and inexplicably deep origin in his mind. The grandkids, Charlene and Peter Jr., were 9 and 7 years old respectively. Charlene had dark hair and eyes, which he had inherited from her mother, but Peter Jr. was fairer skin and hair, unlike his father. These two, though they had babbled excitedly for some time, suddenly realized they were going to be let in a secret. They went silent, and the room went silent with them. The ocean got silent. Even the windows open. Even on the beautiful moonlit winter's evening, you could have heard a pin hit the floor during that moment in the Papagonalis's house. Are you going to tell us the story about Sponge Glantis again? Both children burst into spontaneous laughter immediately, the seriousness of the still moment completely shattered by the inane remark. Spirits were unusually high this evening. Grandpa Atos felt his smile widen, and soon the emotion he was feeling brought a glint of it up to his eyes as well. Sponge Glantis was a bad story, but it was fun to tell little kids. It was silly and made no sense, but Grandpa loved to tell it because it used to cause them to roar uncontrollably with laughter. They still enjoyed it, but they had laughed less and had recently started to question the plot, which was a sure sign they were growing up. They both could use a computer better than he could, despite his efforts to learn technology. Grandpa spent long hours watching Charlie play a mysterious car racing game on her iPad, and occasionally caught himself wondering how bad it would be to let his 9-year-old daughter drive. She obviously had the skills. Kids were getting smarter with each generation. They were ready. He would tell them the secret. No, 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 not Sponge Glantis. And in fact, the story I'm going to tell you, well, I believe it. It actually happened to me. Charlene and Peter Jr. traded glances, clearly trying to decide whether or not they believed it. Atos backpedaled a bit. The story about the sponges? I never believed it. It was just a story. But this one is different. Dare I say, this is a true story. And it takes place here, right here in Tarpon Bay. It was a few years after your dad was born, in fact, when he was still in high school. He waited for his grandkids' reaction, but they just kept staring at him. Finally, Charlie broke the silence with a question about the story they'd been reading. How did Ganymede become a constellation if he was still on Mount Olympus? Bump white chocolate?
Very smart kid, Grandpa replied. People hardly ever ask the right questions. They're more concerned with getting the answers they want. But since you, my granddaughter, asked, I'll tell you. That's not the real story of Ganymede. It's just a myth. The real legend of Ganymede is far more complex. The kids looked at each other and cracked smiles. They were glad to hear about the relationship between the story they'd been reading and the one they were about to hear. Atos took this as a good sign, and he continued to strike this hot iron of imagination he had suddenly stirred up. He was overjoyed to have found it not only in himself, but in his grandkids. Youth is a journey you relive eternally. Every time you take the time to commune with someone younger, he thought. Grandpa's smile grew wider than ever, and as he continued on with his tale, he became more energetic. His grandchildren smiled as their grandfather grew 10 years younger before their eyes. This is the true tale of Ganymede, the story of how he spent his immortality. You see, after 3,000 years on Mount Olympus, Ganymede had grown to miss his human companionship. He was not alone, and so why did he feel that way? He had a mortal soul, after all. The grandkid's eyes were dinner plates, locked in the center of his forehead. Of all the myths, the story of Ganymede fascinated them the most. And why wouldn't it? Ganymede had been the most virtuous of mortals before his abduction. Grandpa Atos had always held that virtue itself was the most important part of living well, and the children had followed along with that idea long enough to take a serious shine to it. As his lips began to move, telling for the first time the legend of Ganymede, their attention in itself was reward enough for him. As Atos spoke, he felt the last vestiges of his fatigue drop away. He remembered what it was like to live without arthritis, without constant fatigue with its forgetfulness and spatters of dementia. And Atos's pure posture changed as he spoke, growing straighter and more confident. Bum, Dylan.
You're going to let me close it out. Thank you. Peter and Demetra peeked in through the crack in the bedroom door where the old man sat between the children's beds, beaming as he performed the story for them. Peter winked at Demetra and pulled the door closed. And guys, we flew through that. That's the end of chapter 1. I think maybe what we should do is go ahead and jump in on chapter number 2 as well. And just kind of give people, kind of this sense of what the work is like and what it's about. Because what we kind of did is the Princess Bride thing. You got the grandfather telling the kids the story, and then kind of sandwiched in the middle is the actual story itself, which is structured to be more like a Greek epic. So it'll be nice to kind of give a taste of that fiction as well. Don't you think, White Chocolate?
Oh, yes, indeed, I do.
Yes, yes,
All right.
yes. Love it. We've just gotten the very first taste, and it's so, so sweet. Keep it going.
As you wish.
Hey, would you like to start chapter 2 for us, Susan?
I would love to. Here we go. Ganymede had been pacing Olympus barefoot for millennia. Denied the sandals of the gods due to his status as a mere demigod, he never forgot why he was different from the other immortals. He had been considering the resolution of his stresses for quite some time before he reached out to Hermes. Years? Millennia? He knew his feelings were different from those of the gods around him. He could sense their puzzlement at his restlessness. What he did not know was why he felt this way. He asked himself about it, until one day he felt a shift. Over the years, he was able to sense the pulse of some semblance of a reason. He was a mortal that had been given immortality, and his human sense of ennui had begun to drag on him. Ganymede needed more somehow. Immortal life was wonderful in every way, but it had lost the shine it had once held despite the initial novelty the infinite nature of his life had held when he first became an immortal. Like stones tied to his feet, he felt burdens of this humanity with every step. At least these days, was how all gods viewed time. He felt foolish for asking these questions, alone and in his head. But still, for the majesty of being a god, he would brave his own philosophy. Philosophy of the gods. Now there's a book humanity needs. This and many other strange ponderings crossed to the vast expanse of his mind, honed by his intact mortal drive to know and coupled with the unlimited time to study. Eventually, Ganymede concluded that he was, in fact, human enough to be truly different from the gods around him, yet also godly enough to differ him significantly from those of his pantheon serviced and the humans down on earth. Ganymede peered downward over the clouds. He could see the Mediterranean Sea fading off into the distance. The sun glistened off the water, and the shadows of the cloud rolled over the lush green hills and vast mountains like wandering beasts. It was a beautiful sight from anywhere, but especially from above. He longed to go back to feel the grass under his feet, the cool hug of the water during an evening swim. Humanity had created an imperfect world, no doubt, but he found more and more that he missed it. Bump Dylan.
All right. Ganymede had been born immortal after all, and he would always be a human first in his mind and heart. He wore his humanity like a badge, and there were some gods here that loved to attempt to persuade him that it was more like an affliction. Being immortal didn't take away his memories, though, nor did it lessen the need he still had to share some connection with humanity, to walk amongst the people, his people, again. Ganymede longed to hear their voices, to feel the raw emotions of mortality, and taste the food that only humans could manage to cook. If he could, he would have loved to idle in a tavern with them, while listening to songs and telling stories, or to feel the embrace of a lover. His long lost humanity itself was all he wanted now. Still, it was a strange sense of godly ennui that he was experiencing. He knew that many of the humans longed for the exact gift of immortality that he had received, as the world around them ground them down and time eventually slew every last one of them. The humans died, but their imperfections made them unique. Ganymede was learning to appreciate the impact that this uniqueness had upon the significance of their individual moments more than he ever had. Sure, the gods were perfect, but perfection is boring and predictable once the sheer impressiveness of it wears off. It was a shiny thing from a distance, immortality, but Ganymede's human mind longed for something it could never provide: novel experiences. Over the patchwork farmland, a rainstorm started. A small plot of land beneath was drenched in darkness and rain. Ganymede imagined being under that thunderhead, feeling the tiny drops as they landed, prickling his skin and raising goosebumps. He wanted to share this view with humanity, but from their vantage. It was more than that. He needed to speak to them, tell them the truth, yell at them at the top of his voice, fists pummeling the air. You've got everything you need right in front of you. Love, as a god, hearing the pleas and praises of men and women across the incredible breadth of the human world, Ganymede had heard countless stories of love. Humans could love anything, it seemed. He had experienced some of the grandest moments of introspection Olympus had ever been graced with, triggered by these humans praying for love, sending love to the gods, spreading their love across the world like a warm blanket. Ganymede loved his flock down on earth. His sheep needed him as he did them. It was a bond that was broken, and he wondered if the sheep ever thought about him after he left Earth. He wondered if they ever hung out with his father's new horses. 4,000 years ago, Zeus gave me these horses, and they must still be alive. He pictured the same 5 horses eating from the same plane of grass for 75 human generations. He wondered why nobody was worshiping his horses, and then he realized somewhere some people probably were. He smiled to himself as he thought of this. Maybe there were statues made in their effigy and some zealous supporters that followed them around. The more he remembered of the mortal realm, the more he missed it. Ganymede decided he was going to talk to Hermes. He would start there. Why did he feel nervous about speaking with Zeus? This was human of him. He knew it, but he did not feel guilty for it. He missed spending time with humanity, and he had decided this was normal and fine. He would do as the humans do, and he would talk to someone. Life as a god was rather superficial. Hermes was the most down-to-earth god in Olympus, and so Ganymede knew his concerns would be heard with a heart as open as his own. Bump Dazri.
He turned away from the vantage of his native lands and walked back to the Palace of Olympus. It was a beautiful place without a doubt, with marble columns supporting fantastic buildings adorned with gods, and cloistered courtyards lined with cypress trees, and Palatian buildings, and paths paved with gold. Glistening streams ran through it tastefully. Its domes and flourished pillars glimmered in the sun, every mosaic arch, every aspect considered and carefully crafted with precision and skill. Perfection could be seen in every curve and angle, in every stone set and chiseled statue. The air was clear, and the weather was always fair, for Mount Olympus towered above the clouds, ruling over even the weather and climate. As he walked through his home, he was reminded that, for all it offered, there was something lacking and empty about the perfect architecture and landscape. There were no mistakes. Nothing about this place was personal. Nothing was human and vulnerable about the vain statues of the gods themselves. Imperfection was myth here, just as perfection was myth on earth below. Even the crystal clear streams and perfectly manicured lawns were somehow too quiet, too artificial. Ganymede didn't even like his own statue. He paused for a moment, considering his strange bone he suddenly had to pick with the gods, all their vanity to conceal their myriad imperfections. If he were to leave, it would change Olympus forever, and the more he considered this, the more urgently he felt compelled to leave. Everyone but Olympus was beautiful and knowledgeable, for knowledge was the pursuit of the gods. They'd not much else to do, except learn and possibly leer and laugh at the humans bumbling on through their insignificant lives. Every so often they took pity on one of these, or found a blessed one to admire. Ganymede walked fast through the paved streets, keeping his eyes down, his mind still racing. He walked past the grand library, said to contain every book that has ever been written, and took a left to the crossroads. The trees wore their abundant fruit like pregnant mothers, and benches were filled with scholarly wise men, dressed in tunics and indulging in a discussion of philosophy, centering around language, ethics, and minds themselves. Ganymede dawdled a while, listening as Athena calmly explained the origins of Western philosophy, subject, object, division to a long-end sage who had been exempt from eternity in the underworld to study with the gods. The idea was an old one, but had recently seen refinement in the vein of Robert Prison's work and other postmodern philosophers. The sage seemed to have a hard time with some of the basic concepts, and Ganymede found himself laughing a bit at some sage's questions. Thus enlightened, Ganymede found his feet knew the way. He focused on where he was going. He passed the palace, Zeus's main dwelling. It was a magnificent structure, held up by swelling arches that on their own dwarfed any of the other buildings nearby. Its entrance was accessible by 64 steps that led to a large, extravagant courtyard. A beautiful garden was found here. Ganymede found it complete with fountains overflowing, with wines of the finest vintage. Half glimpsed within the steaming pools, the shadows of playful nymphs were never far from view. He could hear the voices echo in the tempting delight as they passed. Moving through, he quickly found his way to Hermes' house. This place was more modest structure, but still it towered over Ganymede, looming large in the stillness of the moonlight. Bump easy?
Sorry, just finding my place here. All right, here we are. Hermes was the god of messages, and there was nothing that happened that he did not know about. He had been a true and trusted confidant, leading Ganymede through the transition from a life as a mortal to the odd sort of demigod he was now. By the door, he was welcomed by the mute servant Mythos, who bowed and silently led him to an expansive hall dressed with 100 chairs and a long table decorated for no one. Mythos, an elderly man with long white hair that seemed to flow into his long white beard, gestured to a chair. Ganymede preferred to stand, enjoying the coolness of the marble floor on his bare feet and the slight breeze that blew from the wide open windows. He nodded to Mythos and turned, walking to the window. He needed a few moments to decide what he would say. Suddenly, the door pushed open by itself, and at the other end of the room, it creaked slightly, which was a bit of a surprise. Ganymede had never gotten used to how things happened here. Distracted from his own reverie, he found himself pacing toward the open door without having made up his mind with respect to the argument he wanted to make. He would have to read his audience, Hermes, the messenger of the gods. Hermes wore winged sandals that gave him the ability to fly. He was also capable of moving with an unnatural speed, either running or simply hurtling through the air at will. Being a mere demigod, Ganymede was not granted these magical sandals that all other gods seemed to possess. It enraged him to no end sometimes to be isolated and alienated by what he could and couldn't possess as a formal mortal. As if he had the power to control his past, the sandals allowed all gods on Olympus to come and go as they pleased, moving through the realms with scarcely a thought given. Ganymede has always hoped that maybe if he prescribed to his chores with vigor and diligence, or wandered the halls long enough to make him part of the landscape, that he would be gifted a pair to show his true standing here. But alas, rules were rules. These 10,000-year-old rules were deeply entrenched and scarcely ever questioned by the gods. Hermes sat at a desk of clouds, with his signature helmet sitting on the floor beside him. The chair was made of clouds as well, and all the furniture seemed to be part of the floor, which was also clouds. Ganymede knocked against a wall of clouds, surprised to hear the report of a knock it made. It was definitely a cloud, but quite solid. "This is fascinating," Ganymede said. Hermes looked up from his work without slowing. Hermes held an old-fashioned quill, which he dipped in black ink and applied to the page faster than Ganymede could comprehend. As he looked away, this work continued, but Hermes had realized the quill was now standing facing Ganymede from behind the desk. Ganymede had been given one of the most important tasks among all godly tasks, which was to maintain security of, and once per century disperse the nectar of the gods. He took pride in this task as he had immediately understood its importance. Writing messages to the gods and sending them throughout the world in real time was many steps higher on the ladder, though, he reasoned, remembering to maintain some degree of humility during this meeting. Instantly, Hermes stopped writing. A dozen different flying creatures arrived, each seizing one of the dozen scrolls Hermes had just completed. Flying quickly, hawks, bats, owls, pigeons, and one toucan chaotically careened into the airspace above the desk of clouds. Gone as rapidly as they had entered, a single toucan feather wafted down to become lodged in a cloud that made up the desk. Hermes waved a hand, and the feather floated down into the desk and then out the other side, presumably to land somewhere on Earth. Bump white chocolate.
Ganymede would never not be amazed by how things happened here. The very concept of objects was different. Everything one needed was created in the mind. If you could imagine it, you could manifest it. A chair, a drink, a table, all appeared as if by magic, by the very virtue of simple desire. This rankled a bit for Ganymede. The mercurial gods could get anything they wanted by just summoning it with no effort whatsoever. Gods did not have the calloused hands of the carpenter or the worn back of a farmer, but they still reaped the benefits of imagination and creative power. He had thought of this as he watched Hermes on his woven cloud chair, writing at his ethereal desk. Curled up on the desk, blissfully sleeping, was Alurus. Hermes cleared his throat, and Alurus woke with a start, rustling papers as she noticed Ganymede and bounded away. Good morning, Ganymede, Hermes said with a laugh that played at the corners of his mouth. Hermes, my friend, Ganymede replied, nodding to his friend. At the disturbing sound of a new voice, Aurelius peeks out from behind the curtain where she has been hiding, cautiously observing Ganymede as a cat should. Hermes turned and spoke. How can I be of service to Ganymede today? You look as youthful as Zeus himself. The pen hovered as if held by an invisible hand, awaiting its direction as a scroll lazily unrolled itself on the desk. Should Hermes compose a message during the conversation, or even decide to take a few notes, his hands would not need to find themselves occupied. Would you like a drink? Hermes asks. We have whatever you desire. Goat milk, wine, ambrosia. As he says this, each drink he proposes flowed like mist from a fingertip into an awaiting chalice. Ganymede waved this offer away casually, and each chalice disappeared like smoke in a breeze. Alurus, growing bolder in the presence of Ganymede, playfully chased after the wisps as they disappeared. Sit down, would you? Hermes said, and with the merest flick of his wrist, a chair rose from the cloud-made floor. However, Ganymede remained standing, shifting his weight uncomfortably. His friend gazed at him deeply for a moment. Something is the matter. Ganymede had grown long tired of Zeus. Ha! What was a turning tide if not the one that turned with the current? He had been closely observing how humanity was treating each other these days, and it was not hard to be jealous of them. They were learning to be themselves, and the gods were not keeping up. None of the gods, from Tokyo to Timbuktu and onward further to Paris and paradise. Bump, Dylan.
All right, all right, all right. Humans had made their gods, and things had remained unchanged with respect to this basic structure for a long, long time. Ganymede squinted and looked to the infinite blue sky just above Hermes. He brought his composure back. The memory of his humanity really was seeping into him. The creation myths were backwards. Humanity had created the gods, and he needed the humans to update the gods if they were to remain relevant for future generations. Gods were all powerful, immortal infrastructure. They represented a structure that was key to human society, and Ganymede's gut held a suspicion that it may be time for him to help modernize the mythology somehow, perhaps provide an alternative path forward. He waited for a long time before responding to Hermes, and the messenger god sent another dozen messages before the response came. How would it be if I wanted to return to Earth? Hermes raised one eyebrow at this question and paused for a short second before bursting into a friendly laughter. Young lad, if you want to go to Earth, all you have to do is ask. But you are doing nothing by asking me, except, of course, entertaining the both of us. And I guess you didn't ask. As he said this, Hermes picked up his helmet from the ground and placed it upon his head where it truly belonged. Ganymede thought to himself and realized that to see him without his helmet was a queer sight. The bronze winged headgear was as much a part of Hermes' identity as his smile and wit. I'm supposing you propose that I speak to Zeus then. I, too, had thought this was the proper thing to do, but you are a true friend, Hermes. Not just to me, but to all the gods. I felt comfortable talking to you because you know the business and attitudes of everyone on Olympus. I hope you do not feel I've wasted your time. I saw you writing. You write so fast. I've been approaching my godly duties with vigor for multiple lifetimes now, but some of this, the way you move, I've not picked up these habits yet, such as the pen, which moves free of your hand, allowing you to write so quickly. Hermes smiled wide, flattered by this babble. I do not write any differently than you, Ganymede, except when I do it as the son of Zeus. And yes, you should have a word with him. He is expecting you. Ganymede rolled his eyes at this, but Hermes continued, unfazed. If you were to talk with Zeus on the subject of returning to Earth, you must be assertive. Assertiveness is something you do not lack, but relative to Zeus, well, you need to find your confidence. My suggestion is that you propose to him an idea, full and thorough, which you can defend if he should question it. Is he going to follow me? Ganymede had expected Hermes to make this statement, but found himself feeling upset at the prospect of being held to godly standards while living on the mortal realm. He was not an insecure being, but the proposition of changing the way he'd been living still alarmed him, and he wanted to be sure he knew what he was getting himself into. Be careful of what you tell him. However, no, I believe he will not follow you. Do you remember your travel here by the wings of an eagle? I know you do. We all do. So when I look at your situation, I think the fastest way out is the same way you came in. You should go to Zeus and firmly tell him that you request access to use the mask of the white eagle. He will say yes if you come direct and speak with confidence. Ganymede put his hand to his chin and rubbed it between his fingers, the natural posture of deep thought. He was highly intimidated by Zeus. This was true. He had long thought to ask Zeus for this or that, but in the end, he would always shy away from asking. Now he was considering walking back up to that king of the gods who originally had granted him his immortality. Not just this, but also making a demand that he be allowed to access to visit his homeland. Not only would he be demanding access, he would be laying out exactly how he wanted things to go. Ganymede smiled. He felt reassured and confident that he understood the scope of the thing he would be asking for, and he refocused on Hermes. Thanks for that godly advice, Hermes. I know that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk to Zeus. I'm going to visit my home and reconnect with this new version of humanity I have observed for so long, growing beneath the clouds. Ganymede stood and the chair disappeared, rapidly sinking back into the floor it had initially risen from. Please give them my best, but don't tell them how you know me. Hermes winked as he let this last sentence fly, and he was out of sight before Ganymede heard the finish of the phrase. He does it as the son of Zeus. Ganymede said this aloud to himself, watching as the room around him melted and the clouds that had very recently been accumulated as walls and a writing desk melted. They were now part of the floor upon which he stood. Ganymede turned and left the room that wasn't there anymore, heading not back the way he had come, but heading straight from the former office out into the park area behind Hermes' house. Dazarine.
I reached Zeus in a particular instant and gave him a bow at the same time as I removed my cap. This was customary, and although I was convinced Zeus would hardly even notice if I ceased this habit, I continued to do it for my own satisfaction. Zeus lifts a finger, signifying that he did in fact recognize that I was treating him with respect. The action did not go unnoticed, but complacency had become king amongst the gods, and so neither I nor mighty Zeus did, in fact, give a shit. I arose at the right time and without observing the lifting of the finger. The communication between these Zeus and I was as powerful in terms of body language as it was in resonance. I nodded my head, as if Zeus had just asked me a question to which the answer was yes, except that no question or even statement had even been spoken. It is Ganymede, then. Zeus opened the conversation, his voice booming with power. Yes, father. He is on his way as of current, and he was going to ask for passage to the human realm. I am requesting you grant him this access, and, as you can expect, I'm offering to keep watch on our hero. Not that we should be worried about his betrayal, but more his safety. I knew you would consider the same obligation. The clouds that had been accumulated into the throne melted as Zeus stood, and then, as he stepped from the pedestal, further melted into themselves. Steps raised themselves from the clouds to meet his feet as he descended and dissolved into nothingness as they passed away. And how is he going to ask for passage? I hope you do not recommend the Mask of the White Eagle. If you have to ask that, then you already know, Father Zeus. This is the way. I have seen it. He is not happy here of late, and he deserves happiness. His duties are fulfilled, as of recent, and for 100 years he is going to mope around, looking down at the clouds, doe-eyed, at experiences that should be his for the taking. He is a demigod, after all, and a particularly virtuous one at that. You come and go as you please, and it is still the soul of fair Ganymede to be given the same ability. If you prefer to retain the mask, perhaps a pair of gold sandals would be more fitting, as a reward for our formerly mortal friend. With this, I caught my tongue. Perhaps I was not as happy with things as I wanted to be. Oh, and how simple it would be if the answer was to spend a century on earth. I could sense my father's anger at the suggestion that Ganymede be given a pair of godly sandals, but I fled his wrath before he could direct his anger at me. That seems like a good place to leave it, does it?
Yeah, we're getting up to about 1 p.m. So chapter 2 is just a little bit longer than we really, I guess, had time for. But it's been lovely reading with everyone, and thank you so much for coming out and supporting the project and scoping it out. Does anyone in the audience have quick questions for us, or anything to throw out there or suggest or anything before we wrap it up?
And while people are maybe, getting ready to raise their hand and ask a question, I just want to say, what phenomenal writing. I mean, I'm just already fully sucked in. It would be really fun to just keep going and going, but I think this was a great little sneak peek introduction to what has been, just incredibly coming together with so much talent heaped on over the last couple months here.
Oh, no doubt, easy. Yeah, this has been a fun project to work on, and it's going to be something that I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy. So thanks again, everybody, for coming out. I'm beyond excitement too.
Just same here.
Okay, good stuff, y'all. All right, well, I guess we'll talk to you all later. Thanks for coming out and scoping out the book and just hearing us read through it. We're planning to try to do an audio book version of this as well in the near term. So yeah, all good. Thanks so much, everybody.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone.
Take care and goodbye.